The entry-level cruiser market has been dominated by the Honda Rebel 500, at least here in the Philippines. The low seat height, ease of use, and classic looks makes it a go-to for many beginners. CFMOTO decided they want a piece of that pie using the 450 platform. And for their first ever attempt at a cruiser, on paper at least, it might be better. Let's find out in this episode of Beyond the Ride. Powering the cruiser is a 449cc liquid-cooled parallel twin engine that makes 40 horsepower at 8,000 RPM and 42 newton-meters of torque at 6,250 RPM. You get an inverted front fork with 37mm fork tube, as well as a centrally mounted rear shock. It's got a 320mm single disc up front, branded J1, and for the rear, you get a 220mm single disc. Now, the bike comes equipped with safety features like traction control and dual-channel ABS as standard. The bike sits on 16-inch wheels. Up front, you get 130 by 90, and for the rear, you get 150 by 80. Now, let's talk about the aesthetics. For me, anyway, I know it's a very subjective topic, and it looks like a baby cruiser, which it really is. And about 85% of the bike, if you ask me, looks great. It ends right here, right? I mean, if you look at the bike from here forward, it looks proper. It looks like almost like a Triumph bobber. Where it bothers me is the rear fender. I think it's a little bit too high, and there's just too much clearance here for the rear tire. Again, it is subjective, but this part of the bike for me is a little bit not my favorite part. Let's just say. In fact, it kind of reminds me of that horse meme, that picture, that drawing of a horse meme, where about 85% of it looks great, and then the last part of it doesn't.
Just like Game of Thrones.
Ish. Now, CFMOTO has definitely improved their game when it comes to the fit and finish of the bike. It started, for me at least, with the CLX line, and then it continued with the newer NK and the SR, but this one, I think it's actually leveled up even a little bit more. In fact, when you look at the switch gear of the bike, it's actually pretty good. I mean, it doesn't look as budget as they had in the previous models of CFMOTO. They've really improved significantly, if you ask me. In fact, if you look at the dash, I think this is one of the better looking dashes I've seen in a while. It's modern, but the display is analog. And I like that. I like that touch to it because it is a modern take on a bike that should be retro, right? Cruisers are technically retro motorcycles, but CFMOTO wanted to make it a little bit more modern, and the dash is perfect for that. And the clutch is super light. I mean, this might be, and it's adjustable as well, but this might be the lightest I've ever experienced on a motorcycle. Now, I do love the small headlight, which is typical for bobbers. That's LED, by the way. And I like how CFMOTO has kind of, I don't want to say copy, but they were inspired by some styling and branding that Triumph has done through the years with their own bobber. If you watch the MotoDeal videos of the Triumph bobber, you'll understand what I'm talking about. You have the little CFMOTO logo right here. This also reminds me of the Triumph bobber right here. The gas cap, right? This is very Triumph inspired as well, if you ask me. The key down here as well. Although the Triumph key is somewhere here in the middle, but CFMOTO decided to put it down here up front. Oh, and one more thing. This little logo right here, or this signage that says CFMOTO Motorcycle 1989, again, very Triumph. Now, CFMOTO decided to also go with a belt instead of a chain, and this is really only the third bike that I've used with a belt. And all bikes are cruisers. All the three bikes that I've used with a belt are cruisers, and they're all smooth. I do believe that's one of the reasons why the bikes that I've used that have belts on are smooth, because they use belt instead of chain. You got rear foot pegs right here. Of course, this is for the pillion. But a bike like this, Again, I guess I just don't really like the rear part of this bike. I would definitely take the rear foot pegs out, cut this up, and take this out and just make it a single seater and make it a full-on bobber. I think it would just look so much better that way. It looks good already, but this part right here just bothers me. And I would definitely take this out, find a way to take this out. In fact, I am excited to see what the builders do with this bike, because I assume that there is going to be a lot of custom builds for the CLC. In fact, it's a great canvas for that. It's something that if I was a builder, I would want this as a canvas to work my art on. The fuel tank capacity is 17 liters, and that's actually better than the Triumph Bobber, because the Triumph Bobber, I believe, started off with 9, then became 12. But this is 17 liters. And depending on how you ride, of course, you can get approximately 18 kilometers per liter, which is not so bad. Now, the weight of the bike is 181 kilograms, which is pretty manageable, and the center of gravity is quite low, so it wouldn't be an issue whatsoever. Now, speaking of low, the seat height, as you can see, is rather very Pinoy friendly at 690 millimeters. I'm 5'6" with a 764 millimeter inseam. That's the situation. All right, so let's do a sound test and fire up the CLC. It actually sounds pretty good. Could be a little bit louder, but not bad. So, because you guys always ask for a Caco test, let's do that. Seat height, please.
You know, it's not, you and I are not that far in height.
Yeah, we are.
Oh!
Flat foot.
Oh!
If Caco Tirona can flat foot, there's even a bend on his knee.
Check, look at...
Like, let's straight up boys to men right there, down on bended knee. And if he can do that, anybody can ride his bike. Anyone.
Not naman anyone.
Anyone.
My daughter can.
Okay, anyone of legal age can ride this bike. All right, so let's talk about this CLC. Now, the seat is actually rather comfortable, and I actually like the seat more compared to the 450 SR and the NK. This seems a little bit more premium to me. And the ergonomics, as you can imagine, for a cruiser is pretty comfortable. I am slightly leaning forward, not too much, just a little bit, but that's just something to note if you are shorter than I am. I know there's not that many people shorter than me, but you know, Caco Tirona is significantly shorter. All right, so the controls are a little bit forward. They're not too far forward, but they are just you know, a little bit more forward than a 90-degree angle on my legs. And it's still pretty comfortable. It's still, I don't think you can, no, you cannot definitely not stand up on the bike or on the pegs. But it's not so far forward that it's going to be difficult to drive for the shorter riders out there. As I mentioned, the center of gravity is pretty low, so it is pretty manageable despite the weight of the bike. But the weight of the bike is not so bad. 181 kilograms it's still very manageable. And for city riding, it's pretty good. It's pretty easy to ride in the city. In fact, I've had this bike for about 2 weeks now, and I've been using it on the daily, and I've quite enjoyed it. I've quite enjoyed riding this bike in the city, and it's perfect for it, if you ask me. Filtering the bike is pretty easy as well. The side mirrors will probably get in the way of sometimes, but it's not going to be a massive deal whatsoever. In fact, you can actually reverse the side mirrors and put them underneath or facing downwards instead of facing up, and that would take care of that. It is a very smooth bike, and again, I think it's partly because of the belt instead of the chain, but you can feel it. It's a lot smoother than the 450 NK or the NK 450 and the SR, which is pretty much the same engine. I know it's tuned a little bit differently, but it's this bike is very smooth, a lot smoother than I had anticipated. Now, since I've been riding this bike in the city for about 2 weeks now, you'd expect to feel some heat from the engine, but the truth is I haven't really felt anything. I mean, yes, it's gonna eventually get hot, but it's not uncomfortable. In fact, you don't really notice it whatsoever. And to think that it's right there by my legs, and I don't feel the heat from the engine that much, I think, you know, they've done a very good job with this. The bike is great for beginners who want a cruiser. I mean, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but you feel like you're going fast even though you're not. And I think that's actually good for some people to control, how they twist the throttle. It's got enough power. The power delivery is good. Yes, there is a little bit of slack in the throttle, but it's not significant. And I mean, considering the price point of the bike, I feel like this thing it feels a little bit more premium than other bikes that's close to this price point. Now, during the launch here in the Philippines, it seemed like CFMOTO Philippines wanted to market the bike to female riders who aren't that tall. I think that's a good idea, don't get me wrong. But I think many people would enjoy this bike, not just shorter lady riders. I think this bike could be, for anybody who wants a classic bike starting out to get into bigger displacement bikes. This is a good stepping stone. This is a good gateway to that. I think it's gonna be good for lady riders who aren't that tall. But I think even for the gentlemen out there who want to get into riding, it's actually a good way to start out. Yes, you probably will move on to a bigger cruiser or a bigger bike eventually, but it's a good place to start to get used to riding. Now, as I mentioned, I think where this bike will really thrive is in the custom scene. Yes, I know the custom scene is not as big as it used to be here in the Philippines, but I can't wait for what the builders create with this bike. And I assume that in Zach's Machina show, there's going to be a lot of builds, and this is the base bike that they're going to be using. And I can't wait to see what they come up with the CLC. That's going to be, for me, one of the highlights of that Machina show. The brakes work fairly well. Again, it's not exactly the most powerful bike out there, so the stopping power is decent enough for the performance of the bike. I think the tires actually are quite good. I mean, I've tried to lean it a little bit more. I've tried to push the bike a little bit more as fast as I can go in the city, and I think it's actually fairly decent. And the suspension, it's comfortable. You will feel the bumps, don't get me wrong. You will feel the bumps, especially here in the Philippines, in the NCR, the road conditions that we have. You are going to feel them, but it's not jarring. And I think that's a significant part why this would be a good choice for beginners out there, because it's not going to shock you. The suspension is good enough that it's not going to be able to. It's not gonna really throw you off when you're riding the motorcycle. So another thing I want to point out is there's really not that much vibration on the bike. I felt it more with the NK and the SR of CFMOTO, but this one I didn't feel much vibration at all. I know I wasn't probably riding it as fast as I was with the 450 NK and SR, and you're probably going to push those bikes a lot more than this one anyway. This is a cruiser. This is meant for just cruising along and using it as a daily motorcycle. It's not meant to be pushed. It's not meant to be a performance machine. It's definitely a machine. It's definitely a motorcycle that is going to get you to want to continue riding, and it's also going to get you to want to eventually graduate to a bigger bike. Let's talk about the competitors of the entry-level cruiser market. And of course, I've been mentioning the Honda Rebel because they are sitting at the mountaintop for this segment. But there are other bikes out there that are competitors here in the entry-level area of the cruiser. Like the Eliminator, that's one that comes to mind. Also, perhaps the Bristol Bobber. The Bristol Bobber, if you're looking at the CFMOTO CLC, there's a good chance that you're also looking at the Bristol Bobber 650. Yes, that is a middleweight. Yes, that's probably going to be a little bit more powerful. But I personally would choose the CLC over the Bristol Bobber. So nothing against the Bristol Bobber and nothing against Bristol, but I have seen CFMOTO's factory. I've seen them how they've really improved their bikes through the years. In fact, the first time I tried the CLC was in China, right outside their factory, and it's right then and there. I was really impressed. I was really impressed with the way that they build their bikes, and I just trust the brand already. Yes, it hasn't been around as long as Honda and Kawasaki and so on and so forth, but they've caught up. I mean, they're not quite there yet, but they're on their way. And we're talking about just 30 plus years of them being in operation. But they definitely are making big strides here in the motorcycle segment, because they also have a 4x4 segment, but their motorcycle segment, their motorcycle department has definitely made some big strides through the years. So how does a CLC stack up against the market leader? Well, I think it's actually pretty good. I mean, don't get me wrong. A Honda is a Honda. I get that. And I kind of agree with that to a certain extent. But for CFMOTO's first attempt at an entry-level cruiser, I think they did a pretty good job. And for a price tag of 278,900 Philippine pesos, which is significantly more affordable than the Honda Rebel 500, I think that is an awesome deal. For more information about the CLC and other bikes out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. I'm Gene Orpino. Thanks for watching this episode of Beyond the Ride.